I'm going to show you how to make a book that you can use as a cloud diary. And the idea is that when you sort of look up at the sky and you see interesting clouds, you can grab your book and start to sort of note down the colours and the shapes. And it's just quite nice to have a book of little paintings that have that kind of similar theme running through it. The type of book that I'm going to make, it's very simple. It's one of my favourite bindings. I've just got a 4 paper here that I found lying around the house. And it's a very simple binding, but quite effective. You can do more kind of complicated versions of it, as you can see here. The most basic version doesn't have these corner bits here, but it just has these 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches across and one that loops around the top and bottom, and it creates this quite nice kind of line of thread down spine kind of thing. So I've got a kind of instructions that I'll put on the worksheet. They're quite easy to follow. You just need to make 4 holes along the edge of the paper, and I'll just explain how I've decided to do that. You can either do it evenly, or I quite like it when you have a slightly smaller top and bottom section and then an evenly spaced middle 2 holes, but that's just personal preference. It's entirely up to you. So I'm following these instructions that you'll have as well. The size of this spine is 21 centimetres, and what I've done is I've made marks that are 3 centimetres all the way down, and then these spaces are 5 centimetres each, so there's 3 gaps, but there'll only be 2 holes in the middle, if you see what I mean. So I've marked it out. If you're doing more than, I'm doing about 6 pages here, if you're doing more than that, you probably need to mark the same measurements on all of the pages and do them separately. You can do it on cardboard. I'm using an old rag here that I can press into. You can do it with a drawing pin. I've got a very old-fashioned tool called a bradawl, one of my favourite tools actually, but you just have to be careful that you're not going to hurt yourself with it. And I'm just going to make a hole all the way through all my pages. It's quite important that you keep the pages together if you're doing it in one go. Possibly made the holes a bit too big there, but it's gone through. There we go. Okay, so this is ready to sew now. Looks a little bit manhandled there, but that'll soon sort of flatten out, and I can always iron the paper if I like. I'm going to use, you can use, the proper bookbinding thread has got wax. It's wax coated, and it just stops friction as you turn the pages if you're bookbinding properly, but I'm just going to use normal thread, and I'm going to probably double or quadruple it up so it's a lot thicker. I've only got black thread, but actually coloured threads are quite nice, makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. And I'll show you, I've got a needle that I'm going to sew the book with, and okay, so I've threaded my needle. I've doubled up 2 pieces of thread, so it's kind of 4 threads, if you see what I mean. And then I've tied 4 knots in the bottom to hold it in place when I sew up the book. So I'm just cutting off the end there. And what I'm going to do is I'm following my instructions that you'll have on your worksheet. which look like that. So you can see the first instructions is you go through one of the middle holes from the bottom. Okay, so my knot is enough to hold there, which is good news. So I've come through from the bottom. I'm going to put the needle back through like that. So I'll make a stitch along that edge. You've got to make sure that you pull it tight every time you sew, because it can get very messy at the back otherwise. Okay, so that's my first stitch. Then, following my instructions, I go along to the next hole, like that, pull it tight, and then I go back round. Okay, so I've come up through the next hole, then I go round the edge, like that. I go round this edge that way, down through that hole, to show you how it's progressing on this side. And then down back through the hole with the knot. Down through that hole there, and that way, make sure it's pulled tight, and then back down through the back here, and then I can finish off with my final stitch just there. I'm going to talk to you about some artists to inspire this activity. I suppose the main artist is Constable, and he's very famous for painting the hay wain, and very kind of, not a big fan of his kind of chocolate boxy, you know, picture perfect paintings, but I do love his cloud studies. And I've got a list of artists. I'm going to put them on your worksheet, and I'll put the dates and the movements that they're associated with. So I thought I would show you a series of Constable's clouds. So just very quickly going through them, you can see there, it's quite a range of colours and atmospheres. And I think what I want to do is talk to you about, I'm going to do a demonstration about how some of these effects are achieved with paint. And I just want to talk to you quickly about colour to start with. So I'm sure you're familiar with the colour wheel, and you know about complementary colours and primary colours and secondary colours. And you can see here that there's definitely complementary colours being used, and also dark and light. So there's a contrast in the painting that really makes things kind of jump out and push back. So you've got kind of orangey colours that complement the purples, yellowy colours that complement the purples, orangey colours that complement the blues. And you've even got, what else have we got there? We've got some pink in the sky, and we've got the green, and there's just little touches of green in the landscape. So lots of contrasts going on there. This is mainly blue and white, but there are little touches of gold there. So you can see the blue and the orange are kind of really sparking off each other and creating a contrast. This one we've got sort of purples and yellows, oranges and blues, and then very light and dark areas again. And this one I just find very beautiful, sort of gold colours with different blues, so lots of oranges, sort of orangey yellows, and then blues, and then you've also got little touches of purple here, and some little touches of yellow as well, and those kind of, you know, spark off each other and create a lovely contrast in the colours. It really makes the colours pop, really complements each other. This is a Welsh artist called James Dickson Innes, JD Innes, and he was born in Llanelli, and he went to art college in Carmarthen, and he does these really beautiful landscapes that are full of gorgeous colour and these beautiful sort of stylised skies. But again, he's working with colour, so, you know, sort of think about the colours that are in the paintings. They're quite simplified really, and working with, you know, some of the patterns are repeated, but really, really beautiful, really lovely studies. And then you have things like this, where we've got kind of complementary colours happening here, and then we've got dark against light, so you have a beautiful sense of distance, and all sorts of contrasts. You can probably see my t-shirt being reflected in the in the iPad there. There's no stripes across the mountain there, they go the other way, down that way. Yeah, again, very sort of stylised shapes, and look at the colours that are being used. Really beautiful little studies these are. Delightful. And almost like the shapes are repeated in the clouds. So the shapes of the mountain range here are repeated in the clouds. And you've got kind of street clouds, streets of stripy clouds. And you can see the same thing happening in the mountain. So really delightful. And a darker one with a darker mood. You can sort of imagine the cool of the evening kind of thing, or the cool of the morning. So quite atmospheric. This one is by, different feel to this one. The colours aren't really picking up very well on the iPad, but this is by Piet Mondrian, who's more famous for his distill work. You'd probably recognise his grids with the minimal colour, bits of colour painted in, but this is one of his early studies, and it's called, I think it's called Red Cloud. It looks a bit orange on this video, but this is a sort of orangey red colour with little areas of deep pink. So it's quite surreal looking there, isn't it? The other artist that I want to show you is called Magritte, Rene Magritte, and he was a surrealist, but I just love how the clouds are being used here. So he sort of painted the blue of the sky, he's painted the shape out of the ship, so it almost looks like a ghost ship. We're not sure if it's real or not. And then he's created these shapes, this surreal collection of shapes out of clouds, sort of imagining, sometimes when you look at the clouds, and actually I think it would be a good exercise to watch clouds on a sunny day and cloud burst, and also see if you can recognise any shapes, like if you can recognise a bear or a dog or a dragon, anything like that, in the cloud shapes. But really beautiful mountain range painted there in the background, and then this quite surreal sort of stem glass holding a frothy cloud in the top of it. This is quite an unusual one as well, which links back to the Mondrian red cloud. This is a red cloud by, now, Paul Klee. I think is supposed to be pronounced Powell Clay. And yeah, just a completely different approach, but the theme of the red cloud, so I thought that was quite a nice link. So I think that's all of my examples there, which I think is enough to keep us going. And I'll start to show you some examples of how to use paint. Hello, I'm just going to talk to you about how to go about filling in your cloud diary. You can see I've started mine. Some studies worked, some didn't, but that's just the nature of it. It's just for fun. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the colour wheel. I've put one on the worksheet, and I just want to point out the primary colours, the secondary colours. The complementary colours are the primary colour and the opposite secondary colour. And we're going to be using 3 colours, which are the primary colours: blue. I'm choosing a sort of rose colour red so that it mixes better with the blue to make, so it's more of a magenta sort of colour, which makes a better purple, and a yellow. And I've also got some white. I've got quite a large brush, but it's got quite soft bristles, and when it's wet it goes to a point. So if I want to do detail, I can use the tip of the brush, but I can also make really lovely marks by using kind of like the side of the brush and sort of wiggling it around as well to get those lovely sort of soft cumulus sort of clouds. I've got a water pot. I need to make sure that my water is kept nice and clean, otherwise my colours will go a little bit muddy. And I've got a tissue so that I can control how much water. I can just blot the brush and make sure that it's not going to flood when I don't want it to flood. It's also handy if you do put too much water on the paper, you can also sort of dab it back. So we're just using the 3 primary colours. We're not using black, but for our darker colours we're going to mix the complementary colours together. So you'll mix a purple and mix it in with the yellow, or you'll mix a blue and mix it in with the orange, and that'll give you a sort of darker. They often go kind of like greyish sort of colours. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by talking about using painting techniques. This is my palette, it's a little bit scruffy. I'm going to put my primary colours on there. These are acrylic paints. But you can use poster paints or watercolours. Different paints have different kind of effects, but even if you use watercolour, which is very translucent, or you can see through, if you add white to it, and you often get watercolour sets with white, if you mix white to it, it becomes opaque, so it sort of covers up rather than you can see through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a wet in wet sort of effect. And I think I'll make a blue. So I've got a blue, and I'm also going to make an orange colour as well. Okay, so for wet in wet, you need to use the paint in quite a watery kind of way. And you can see as soon as you add colours alongside that sort of watery main colour, it sort of bleeds in. So one of the things with it, particularly if you're doing sunrises or sunsets, you can get these really lovely luminous colours working on your painting. If you allow the white of the paper to come through, it creates more of a luminous effect than mixing with white. So where possible, if you want to create a sort of luminous effect, you can do that by doing a kind of glaze or a wash of colour. And also it's about light against dark, so you need to kind of create a contrast of light and dark areas. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm mixing blue and the magenta together to make a purple, and I'm going to start to darken some of these areas with a glaze or a kind of wash, a watery layer of this purpley colour. Let's mix a little bit more. And allow things to happen with the water. So you can see, hopefully, I don't like that stripe that I've made there. I can sort of break that up with shapes of cloud. So I'm starting to use slightly thicker paint now in places so that I get the contrast between the light areas and the dark areas. So hopefully it'll give it kind of a luminous effect there. Okay, and now finally I'm going to add a thicker, I'm using white paint here. I'm going to use some opaque paint on the top now. And again, I'm going to sort of roll the brush and just add some, hopefully, natural looking white clouds. In here as well. There we go.